Does opposite action hold the secret to personal growth?
Hey Tyler,
Brannon, how you doing, man?
dude, that was kind of a tongue twister for you.
I know. I know. I'm trying to get this thing all rolling here. We've got three different tabs open and I'm trying to, and then you're pointing at me like, hey, it's your turn to do the tease today. So
It's fun to watch you juggle a little. Um, but before we get going, I do want to share a review that we got. Um, and it's really simple and to the point, but it's really kind. So it says great insight, and it says these counselors know their stuff. They see things that other counselors miss. They have emotional intuition and deep perception into all human interactions.
that's awesome. Thanks
If
for
that
the
doesn't make you
review.
feel good, Tyler, then
That's a nice little boost for the day for sure. You know what's funny about that is that I think you said these counselors, right? You read these counselors. Sometimes if you go back through our videos and you see certain chat, you kind of know what's coming when it says these counselors, but counselors is in quotes. Like, if you see these counselors in quotes, that means someone's about ready to tee off on you. But this one didn't have quotes around it, and it was actually really nice.
Yeah, yeah. Appreciate the kind words. Luckily, we get more kind words than the hate, but honestly, I don't mind the hate either. It's kind of
And
fun.
it's fine sometimes.
Um, so should we dive into this one, Tyler?
Yeah, just really quickly before we jump into it, we just wanted to remind people that we love talking to you. We love our guests. I think our listeners love our guests. And if you're listening and you have a question, whether you want to come by yourself or come on as a couple, we would love to have you guys come on the show. Go to therapybrothers.org and then just hit the button to come on the show. And there should be a way for you to instantly just schedule. We record Mondays and Wednesdays at this time, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. And we do have some people lined up, but there are a few slots out there in the future, in the very near future. So, therapybrothers.org. Come join us. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, if you're right on the edge and you've wanted to like come and you're like, I don't know, just step over that edge and come hang out with us. We'll have a good time, I promise. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll feel like you got some direction and some help and some understanding of how to move forward. So, Tyler, opposite action. People probably hear that and wonder what is that? What are we talking about?
Yeah. So yeah, I think today probably we should explain opposite action and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the benefits that it can provide. So the background behind opposite action actually has its roots in dialectical behavioral therapy or DBT. So the way DBT is lined out is it's lined out with a series of different sets of skills. So at the top is mindfulness skills. And the theory is that if you learn to be mindful, that means you're present, living in your moment. And then once you're mindful, you can then have access to choose from the rest of the other skills that are below it. And there's three categories of skills below it. There's one category that is for distress tolerance, which is how do you handle crisis? How do you handle really heavy emotions? Things like that. The second category of skills is called emotion regulation skills, which is how you sort of keep yourself balanced and coping and know how to manage the comings and goings of the world as they happen to you every day. And then the last category of skills is relationship skills. Basically, how do I get along with people and how do I get what I want in relationships? And the opposite action skill is an emotional regulation skill from DBT that helps you to make sure that you're responding to the reality that you're living in with an appropriate level of emotion.
Yeah, I'm just thinking teeing you up to talk about DBT is like you're like a boxer in the ring. You're like a dolphin in the ocean. It's just like in right in his element. Um, I love it.
Right,
Um,
man. I know it is true. Like the minute when you were talking about what we wanted to talk about today, you're like, let's do opposite action. I was like, DBT.
yes,
I love DBT,
ka-ching,
and I tried to slow play
DBT.
you, like, that one could work. Well, let's do that topic today. So
Yeah, but I love DBT too, and Um, but it's to me, opposite action, Tyler, is it runs deeper than just a DBT skill. It is quite possibly one of the most therapeutic things that people can do. In many ways, it's the little or the big steps into the cave that people fear to enter. It's a signal that somebody has unburdened their protective parts and they're acting different than they normally would. Um, or simply put, it's courage. Um, and it's courageous and it's scary and difficult. But doing those type of things can change everything for somebody. Um, and a lot of
Yeah.
times people aren't even conscious of the actions that they're doing. So it's hard to get to opposite action because they're just on autopilot in their default setting. So it's hard to understand, like, oh, what could I do differently to shift the way that I feel to create different outcomes in my life? Um, so yeah, it's an awesome skill, but it's also so much more than that.
Yeah, well, it takes a few other skills to be able to use it properly. And maybe even before we go even further than that, let's just pause and explain a little bit more fully what opposite action is. So so the idea behind opposite action is this is that we as human beings, we come hardwired with certain emotional responses that are just going to happen in our lives based off of the stimulus that we get from the world that we receive. Right? So if we're walking down the trail and we hear or bump into a grizzly bear that's on the side of the trail, instantly every single human being is pretty much going to have the same response physiologically. They're going to feel some kind of anxiety or fear, and that anxiety and fear is going to feel a certain way in their body, probably an increased heart rate, tightness, more shallow breathing. The body is getting itself ready probably to run away
To survive.
or to get away or to try to to survive. It's to survive, right? And the idea is that that's true for every emotion. So if you feel sad, there's typically a certain kind of a response that comes with feeling sad. If you feel anxious, there's a typical response that comes with feeling anxious. If you feel angry, there's a typical response that comes with being angry. And oftentimes, we as human beings are really, we're almost sometimes too smart for our own good. Our brains will sometimes respond in some form of emotion at a higher or bigger level than the facts of the situation would warrant.
Right.
So, so in order to be able to understand the opposite action skill, we have to also then get really good at number one, becoming aware, and then doing another skill that's called checking the facts. So, if I wake up today and I'm just buried by anxiety, but then I look ahead at my day and my day has like three appointments and a couple of online groups and then a plan to watch some TV with the girls. The level of my anxiety this morning is not factually correct to what the day that ahead of me is.
Okay.
So now I'm suffering for no reason at all because my brain is spinning me up into something that's an emotional reaction that doesn't fit the facts.
Right. And one thing to add, Tyler, we have, like, of course, everybody's going to run away from a bear. Well, maybe.
Well, you're not
Um,
supposed to run, you're supposed to back away.
yeah. But we have, we're born and we do have some innate things inside of us in terms of how we respond to things. Like my son responds very different to situations than my daughter does. Because they're different. And so they actually respond differently, have a different emotions according to the trigger. And then on top of that, just innately we're that way. But on top of that, then we have unique experiences that shape our perception and our reality and our defense systems to this world so that we can survive. And so fast forward into as you progress in development, you then have all these innate systems in place, but all of these built systems as well that respond to the world. And when you were a child, it felt like they worked. And when you're an adult, you're getting certain outcomes in your life, and those responses aren't working. And so that's where it's like, okay, maybe I need to look at these systems and act opposite to what they're telling me.
That's right. So when the facts of the situation don't line up to what your overall goals are, and to what your emotional response is, then that is the time when you would use the skill of opposite action. So if I say I have, let's say I'm petrified about going into the world and doing public speaking. And the natural tendency of that fear and anxiety is to shrink away, turn down opportunities. And pretty soon I'm shrinking my whole world, but then I'm miserable. And I'm like, why am I so closed in? And why can't I hardly get myself to even go outside anymore these days? The reason why is because I've let autopilot dictate to me that I should not put myself out there. And so if I actually want to expand my world, I'm going to have to lean into the discomfort of the next opportunity that comes my way to do some public speaking. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to step into that. And that's where I think you were talking about, and that can be done with lots of other things. Like if I'm feeling sad and depressed, I know this is like for people who are depressed, they're like, but you don't understand. But the truth is, the thing that needs to happen if you're sad and depressed is you need to get out of bed and get moving.
Yeah. Which is opposite action to what you're
That's
being
opposite action.
feeling like doing. That Tyler, here's a very common one that we see all the time. But and it happened last week with a client of mine. She's experienced betrayal trauma fairly recently, and she wants to check in with her husband quite a bit over the phone, and she calls him and he doesn't answer, and she texts him and he doesn't answer, and so her fear kicks in, her protective parts kick in, and she starts stalking him on the phone, like, where is he, what is he doing? She's thinking about driving to where he's at. She's like, everything goes like
Into like
into
control mode, trying to find
into
safety.
panic control mode, try to find safety. um in that moment, opposite action is really hard, because opposite action would be something like, I'm gonna stop focusing on him. I don't have control over him. um I'm gonna try to surrender him over, let him go, and I'm gonna focus on my self-care right now.
I'm going to call a
um,
girlfriend and go to lunch.
I need to calm down. I need to maybe take a shower, meditate, pray, um, just check in with God, like know that I'm loved, and I'm not gonna like freak out about him. Now, think about that. As someone who's experienced betrayal trauma, that is excruciating.
That's really hard.
Yeah. And yet, why is that good, Tyler? Why is that good for her to do that?
Well, it's good. It's good in a couple of ways. One is that she's not wasting her energy trying to chase something that she ultimately doesn't really have control over anyway.
Yep.
So she's not going to exasperate herself and feel even more burned out and tired and maybe resentful. But the other thing that it does, that I think is maybe even more important than that, is that it teaches her to trust herself to manage her body. She actually learns to empower herself to know that she can still be the person who makes the choices rather than letting the autopilot take over.
And then he has all the power, all the control, and all the everything in the relationship, right?
Yes, then she also, that self-trust then also helps, once that starts to get developed, that actually helps to ease some of that anxiety that's there in the first place, because she now knows, okay, whoa, there's my heart, it's pounding. Everything's really tight. My hands are sweating. I'm feeling like, uh-oh, nervous. What do I not know? This, that, and the other. Now I know that when that comes up for me, I can quickly check the facts and say, okay, the facts today don't actually line up for me to be having this response. Therefore, I'm going to go do some relaxation. I'm going to go do some breathing. I'm going to go sit in an open posture. I'm going to soften my muscles. And when she realizes that she has access to control that part of herself, to manage and regulate that part of herself, she doesn't naturally get as anxious in the future anymore, because the thing that's scary is that the autopilot kicked off and made it feel as if the whole dishonesty, lying, cheating is happening again.
Yeah. Yeah. Tyler, it's really difficult to check the facts in an emotional state of mind. So it's like, yeah, check the facts and do opposite action. Well, sometimes like the facts don't come easy. They're not easy to access. Let me give you an example. Um, like I've flipped my groups off many times. So I'll flip them off.
Like you flip the bird at them.
Oh yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
double, sometimes the double flip, like
I
whatever.
always like the crossover. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and I'm teaching check the facts. So when I flip the bird at first, and I don't really tell them what I'm doing, I just start flipping them off. And what happens when I flip the bird? Everyone's like, "Whoa! Like what the heck?" Like,
What do we do?
sometimes I'll raise it up, like
Uh,
and they're like, "Whoa, that's crazy! What's he doing?" They start laughing because they know making a point, but there's an emotional response to it that's like, "Whoa, what's happening here?" Um, and I ask them like, "What is this?" And they say, "Well, yeah, you're telling me to f off, or like, yeah, yeah, it's obviously rude and this and that, and like, there's all this meaning, all this meaning." And I say, "Well, let's check the facts. Like, what is this?" And they're like, "Well, you know." And it starts to soften. And then I kind of push them again. What is it? Fact of the matter is it's Brannon's middle finger that's raised. Like that's all it is my finger. Is it. So if my finger is raised, like if we remove all the meaning and all the emotion and all the things,
story.
and we just get to the fact, right? With sometimes I'll draw Mickey Mouse on the board, so three circles, and I'll say, "What is that?" And some people are like, "Ugh, Disneyland. Like I hate taking my kids to Disneyland. Like, oh my gosh, like so expensive." Some people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the best ever. I love it. Like that's great." And I say, "Well, what is that?" And they're like, "Well, it's Mickey Mouse and there's all this meaning." And it's like, "Well, but what is it really?"
It's
And
three
they're like,
circles
"Yeah." And so they go there next and I say, "No, what is it?" It's ink on a whiteboard.
in
Like
the shape of three
in the
circles.
shape of three circles. It's ink on a whiteboard in the shape of three circles. Do you see all the meaning and all the everything we put on that? But when we can get down to the facts, just the facts of the situation, then we can choose how we want to respond. So, like this example of um, betrayal trauma, he didn't answer his phone.
He didn't return the text.
Okay, that's it. That's all. That's like I text him, he didn't text me back. That's all that's happened at this point. I'm not trying to invalidate the trigger, or I totally get why it's there. I understand
Of
why she would
course.
respond in such a big way. But it would be helpful for her to say, "Okay, take a deep breath. Let's just check the facts here."
And the facts would include the physiology that she's feeling too.
Yeah, wow.
So,
A
oh, my
fact is I
face is
felt
flushed.
this. And yeah,
My heart is pounding. I feel sweaty palms. I'm breathing shallow. Those are all part of the facts too.
right. And I'm going to acknowledge those things instead of just spin in my emotion and react to the situation. I'm going to actually respond in a way that's helpful. Um, and so that's that's what opposite action is. Tyler, the one of the most important places to practice opposite action is when we feel shame. Shame usually leads to thoughts that are lies inside of our head.
Yes.
And so just like you were saying, when the facts don't meet up with the response, then you're not in reality. When you're not in reality, it's good to practice opposite action. When you are in reality and you have an emotion, it's good to follow that emotion. If there was a child out on the street about to get hit by a bus and I felt scared and I felt like I need to run out there and save the child, that's a good emotion, right? That's a good thing,
That's appropriate emotion with the facts of the situation.
right? When the facts don't meet the reality, then opposite action needs to happen. Now with shame, I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable.
I'll never measure up. This makes me unworthy.
I'm just stupid. I'll never be seen as important. all of these things are lies. And if you've been shame screening, you have been acting in that shame because you're afraid that somebody's going to see that what you believe about yourself is true,
Yes.
right? So opposite action is really important here.
And I think understanding what the natural, what are the natural default behaviors that go along with the experience of shame.
Yes.
So, because then you can know what to do that's opposite. So shame has some kind of twin sister sort of like words that go with it. Things like hiding, isolating, secrecy, insulating, shrinking. That's what shame leads us to want to do. It wants us to cover up.
Avoiding
It wants us to avoid. It wants us to protect. So
an act.
when you're talking about shame screens, Brannon, those are some of the behaviors that are the protection of the shame. So the shame screens are things like I'm going to fight you and distract and attack you, or I'm going to disappear and shrink away and hide and play small,
I'm going to
right? Or
overcompensate.
I'm going to overcompensate and make sure you're really, really happy with me. When in reality, one of the biggest tools of shame resiliency is this skill, which is to say, okay, I'm feeling shame right now. That leads to me feeling terrible about myself, these are all lies, right? That's what you're saying, Brandon. These do not actually fit the facts. Therefore, what I actually need to do with my shame is I need to bring it above the surface.
Mhm.
I need to give it some context and I need to let other people see me.
Shame pushes you into the dark, and how you deal with it and really grow from it is to bring it out into the light.
Speak it.
And that is the opposite thing that you'll ever want to do with your shame. But when you do that, it's like, whoa, I don't have the shame.
Your
The
whole
shame's
body
going
will
away.
fight you on that.
Yeah. Yep.
But when you do it and you're able to share it and speak it and see it with people who can actually hold it, that's a very powerful change that starts to happen in the brain and in the body, where it's like, oh, wow, that person still loves me even after I just told them about this thing.
Yep.
Right. Do you remember, Brannon? Like, and I think she'll be okay with this, but our sister Lindsay, when she was a little girl, she was like all clammed up at a family trip and like all scared and wouldn't talk to us. And like, she's like, I've done something terrible. I've done
Yeah,
something
I know what
terrible.
you're
We're
talking
like, I can't
about.
even say it.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this anymore. And then like everyone's like, oh, like what's wrong? Like, come
I
here. Like,
literally, I literally thought like she was in, like we need to rush her to the hospital
oh,
or
I thought,
something.
yeah,
Like
she thought, and I'm so bad. I'm so bad. I'm so
something is
bad.
very bad.
Like she's a little tiny girl, you know, and finally, she like threw this like she could barely choke it out because she was so ashamed of it. She's like, I I swallowed a button.
I shouldn't laugh.
Like she had found like some button that was somewhere and had put it in her mouth or whatever and accidentally swallowed it. And she just thought
It was,
everybody was going to be disappointed in her, that she was probably going to die, that she was a terrible person. And I was like, oh man, the minute she could just speak that out loud and everybody could be like, oh, you're okay. Like, it's not what you think it is.
like
Like, that poor little girl was just living in pure shame, and all she needed was just to speak it out loud and let somebody say, hey, it's going to be all right.
my daughter was in third grade, and like one night she was just having a really hard night, and like, and she started crying, and she's like, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Like, tell me. And she's like, I've never told anybody this. And I'm like, okay, like, tell me. Like, I stole some crayons when I was in kindergarten. No, but to her, like, she's been
That was
holding that
massive.
for
That was
years.
massive. That's a
Yeah.
burden that she's
And
carried.
she's hidden it. And she's so there she brings it to the light. And you can imagine what happened after that. It's just diffused it. She was like, whoa, like I feel so good. I feel light. I
My
feel,
dad still loves me, and
yeah, like that. Whoa.
I'm not going to jail. Like,
But sometimes it's not so simple, Tyler.
yeah.
And I think of like I heard a story this week about someone who hates their job because their boss micromanages them. And, you know, he's just willing to kind of take that micromanaging, like deal, and then he does things to like passive aggressively get around it and this and that and all this stuff. The shame is saying, you better kind of not face this head on. You better deal with this in other ways. Opposite action to that shame would be having some real communication and boundaries and honesty with that boss about what will work for him and what won't. Now, there's other fears there beyond shame. There's
Sure.
stability, there's,
There's the possibility of the loss of a job.
that type of stuff. But the reality is he's that job is he's not going to keep that job the way it's going because his shame is he might, but the boss will be unhappy and he'll be unhappy too, right?
Well, and he'll just sink further and further into the shame, which then leads to more and more misery.
Yep. I was talking to another guy last night and um he's like, "Yeah, I want to start this business. I feel like my not much purpose in my life, blah 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 blah." And so then he told me what the business was, then told me all the reasons why he's scared to start it and why he probably won't. And I'm and I'm listening and I'm like, well, maybe opposite action needs to come in of like instead of not doing doing nothing to start this, maybe you need to go fail some, maybe you need to step into it. Maybe you need to actually take some risk here. That's opposite action to his shame, right? And he'll probably fail as he starts in, and then the
Yes.
shame will come up even more and say, retreat, hide. And again, can he say, whoa, there's the shame. I'm going to act opposite to that again. I'm going to learn from that failure and move forward. Um, but it takes consciousness of the emotions. It takes courage to actually step into that opposite action and then it's really helpful to have some connection afterwards of like, hey, you're all right, you're doing fine, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that was scary, but wow, good for you, that's amazing.
In a certain sense, it also takes a willingness to try to be adopting a whole new way of looking at life.
Yeah,
Because with that growth mindset idea, because the truth is that when you're looking at something right now, maybe some of our listeners are looking at their own lives right now and saying, man, there's the new frontier that I know I need to step into, or man, here's the shameful thing that I just am so afraid to confront right now. Um, the truth is that when you actually step into those places with that opposite action, it does take awareness and intention. Chances are it's not going to be like all good either. There's going to be some pain because you're going to be in the midst of change, and change comes with pain. So there
right.
might be that risk of the loss of a job. Or, I'm thinking of a person that both you and I know, Brannon, right now, that had shame totally wrapped up in the workplace and just recently stepped off the edge of that cliff and said, I'm no longer going to go to this place where my shame is sourced. I'm going to do something different. And the truth is that this person is actually in a really hard spot right now, a really difficult spot. But that person is in a better spot in the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what's going to come to fruition, than they are staying in the same place that they were, just living in shame every single day.
Yeah,
But there's still consequence and pain there.
yeah, I just yeah, I agree, like that's what we protect against is those consequences. Like we're so scared of the consequences. So we try to stay comfortable and so we protect against those things and then we create suffering in our lives. Um,
through the
but
through the pursuit of that self-protection.
but those consequences, and this is I like what you said, Tyler. This is a whole new framework of life because if you can look at those consequences as just part of the process, as part of the growth, as part of the learning, as part of the experience. When you're in that state of uncertainty, it's actually kind of awesome. Like it's pretty amazing. So therefore, um, if you're stuck in a place that's causing you suffering, uh, you can change it if you're not scared of that uncertainty. If you're not scared of those consequences, I think of like an analogy that I brought up before is when I was in the Philippines, there was dogs on the street everywhere, and every single day a dog would bark at me and start, coming toward me. And what I learned early on was the natural response is to run, and that's the worst response. Um, the best response is to turn and face the dog. Now, when you turn and face the dog, you're standing there still, and the dog can come bite you. Right. It's scary. The consequences could happen, right?
Yes.
But what happened every time for me when I was there was that dog would stop and walk away when I would turn around and look it in the eye. Um, so I had to do opposite action. I had to trust that doing that opposite action was the right thing for me. And then I had to let the consequences fall where they should. I could have gotten bitten,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so the example you just gave, like I know that change is better than suffering, that the discomfort of the shift and the change is way better than giving your life away. So the opposite action to step into that's called faith. That's called courage. That's going to actually be good if you stay steady with moving through your integrity and your truth as you do that, right?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page with that, Brannon. And it's an interesting thing because it's still got the both end of there's validation for the scariness of doing it, but there's also the actual payoff that does happen when you start to live that way. Right.
Yeah.
There's the struggle and the consequence of choosing that, but that consequence is the consequence of the choice of growth versus the consequence of sitting on the sideline and just watching, whatever it is, life pass you by, whatever it is that you need to, confront or whatever in your life.
Yes.
Um, you know, I and it makes sense. There's fear either way. The question is are we going to be intentional with how we treat our fears? Or are we going to just let the automatic part of us rule that part of our life? And the simple truth is that when we let the automatic part of us rule that part of our life, by nature of being human, by the way our brains and the chemistry of our brains work, eventually it will become a tyrant because it's built to find the negative, it's built to self-protect, it's built to always keep you alive, and eventually it will put you in a tiny little corner of a prison cell inside your own mind because it doesn't have the human part of you to put it in check sometimes and say, hey, you know what? Sometimes a little bit of risk and a little bit of danger is exactly what the doctor ordered.
Well, and Tyler, and this is kind of the ancillary important part to this is when you actually go practice that opposite action, you step into that courage, you gain wisdom and find out things about yourself that you couldn't find out otherwise. So yes, it's great that you're having a boundary with your boss, but it's even better that you're learning about yourself, that you're strong enough to have that boundary, that you're strong enough to speak your truths. That like it's like, wow, like that's awesome. I know who I am more instead of living in that hellhole of shame where you're just trying to survive, right?
That's exactly right. And you think about it, all those systems that our bodies and brains have built into them, they're there for a good reason. But the one gift that we have been given as human beings is our ability to choose. And the more that we claim our ability to choose and use that to live with intention, the more significant the amount of growth that we have in our lives.
Yep. Yep. The Tyler, the three things that I'd like beat into my kids' head over and over. I believe this is kind of the key to life. This is how I want to live my life. You believe in yourself, you do your best, and you have fun. Those three things, like you can apply that to anything, whether it's building a business, whether it's going to school. And if you do those things, if you actually believe in yourself, then shame's not going to run the show. Um, I got to get this in here because I just have to, but I got a man crush on Jaden Daniels. Um, he, I love him. I love him.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that.
Well, I've been a Redskins fan my whole life. Now they're the
Oh, so just
command.
because he made him good now, that's
Oh
it?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well, but then it's like you become a fan and you start like kind of seeing who is this guy who's starting to dominate. And it's like, holy crap, like humble, hardworking. And he sent out a tweet or something when he was like 12. And it was something like, hey, one day the world's gonna know who I am. Um, and I'm looking at what's happening, and I'm thinking like, because I'm a fan of the Commanders,
Sure.
I'm thinking like, could a rookie actually win the Super Bowl? Like, we're 2 games away. Um, could a rookie actually do it? And I thought if there's a rookie that could do it, it's him, because it feels like to me that he doesn't live his life in a way that's like I the stage is too big. I could be looked at as a failure. He's not scared of failing. He'll step into that. He'll try it. He'll go there. He's a young guy, and he's in the NFC Championship as a rookie. Now, I don't know everything about him, but those who create amazing things, Tyler, throughout history, are the ones that didn't allow fear to dictate their life. And and the beauty of it is that every single person on the face of this earth has that choice. You can step into believing in yourself, doing your best, and having fun, or you can wither away in your shame and live in protection mode and try to avoid pain in your life. That's the choice that we all have in all kinds of situations, whether it's relationships, whether it's school or work or whatever. That's the decision that we have. And so I just want to encourage people: live a life of faith, live a life of courage, face your demons, turn and look at the dog in the eye, and act opposite to your shame.
I love it, Brannon. There's not much more for me to say, man. I love the three keys. I want to repeat them one more time. Believe in yourself, do your best, have fun.
Have fun along the way.
Yeah,
Boom.
I like it, man. That's a pretty simple recipe to be teaching a group of kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, thanks, man. It was a good conversation. It's funny that you said right at the end there, Brent. I just kind of felt this difference and shifted my energy. That when you're living from a place of fear and trying to cling to what you've already got, that's already closed. Everything's closed. And when you were talking about the other way of living, which is to say, okay, I'm going to embrace life and I'm going to believe in myself and do
Expansion.
my best and have fun, then man, everything opens up. I felt
Yeah.
that. I actually felt that physiologically in my body while you were talking. And man, what a better way to try to embrace life in that sort of full on open position rather than the closed up self-protective position. Man,
Absolutely.
I'd sure rather like to live that way than the other way. So, thank you to our listeners for being here. Thank you for the support that you give us. And until next time, keep on keeping on.